Now that was the single greatest Brexit interview I've ever seen. Not because it was biased against Brexit or against Farage, but because it did what any reasonable journalist is supposed to do. You got the head of a major political party, ahead in the polls, calling for us to leave the EU without the deal because that's what the people voted for, when he himself told people to vote for Brexit on the basis of getting a deal. So obviously the first thing you should say to him is, but you promised we'd get a good deal. And that's what Marr did.
Good morning. Nigel Farage, in 2016, why did you not advocate no deal?
Because it was obvious that we could do a free trade deal. The problem is the Prime Minister never asked for it.
Wrong again. We did ask for a free trade deal. That would have been the Canada-style model, but that would have left Northern Ireland separated off from the rest of the UK in order to preserve the Good Friday Agreement.
Here's an example of what you said at the time.
If Norway, Iceland and Switzerland can get deals that suit them, we can do something far, far better than that. Norway chooses its own deal. We will choose our own deal.
My point is fairly simple, that during the referendum you were advocating one thing and now you're advocating something different. You're advocating a no-deal Brexit.
Well, because the only way we can deliver the democratic will of the people is to leave on WTO terms, even if that led to some short-term economic disruption. You know, moving house leads to short-term disruption.
He had to use the house analogy.
And I'll tell you something, once we do that, the European Union will be banging our door down to have a sensible tariff-free deal.
Okay, let's just follow the logic here. He says there might be some short-term disruption, but when you move house, of course there's some short-term economic disruption, which means he's arguing that we can sort out whatever deal we get after we've left without one. But if you're using the house analogy, that means you're leaving your own house without knowing where you're moving to. So you have no way of guaranteeing that that short-term economic disruption is actually going to be short-term.
So you can accept that from the point of view of the referendum in 2016, there is no mandate for a no-deal Brexit.
What about democracy?
Well,
what about the fact that 500 MPs voted for Article 50, which said we would leave on March the 29th with or without a deal? That, Andrew, was part of UK legislation. It has not been delivered.
Now that argument is simply stupid. MPs voted to trigger Article 50, which means we leave the EU with or without a deal after 2 years, but Parliament can change its mind. One of the most fundamental principles of the UK's unwritten constitution is Parliament cannot bind its successors. So if the Parliament decides to do something, it can change its mind the next day. That's what parliamentary sovereignty means.
Every single major player in the referendum, everyone on both sides said leaving the European Union is leaving the single market and customs union. It could not have been clearer.
Now that argument's simply a lie. Of course the people on the Remain side said we'd lose single market access, said there'd be tariffs outside of the customs union. But the people on the Leave side, they're the ones who said we'd keep all the access. They said we'd have total access to the single market and customs union. Dominic Raab said it.
That's what you mean by full access to the single market. I think we would not see any trade barriers go up because we're the 5th biggest economy in the world.
David Davis said it.
Do you think we would get all the advantages of the single market for we would pay no price for that access?
No, we would not lose anything in terms of our access to European markets.
Daniel Hannan, one of the campaign chairs of Vote Leave, said
absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market.
Nigel Farage defended the idea of being similar to Norway, which is inside the single market.
Now, you say that you weren't advocating some kind of Norway-style agreement for us. You also said, wouldn't it be terrible if we were like Norway and Switzerland? Really? They're rich, they're happy, they're self-governing.
Yes.
We're told Norway doesn't have a seat at the top table. Oh, yes, it does. That sounds to me like you're advocating a Norway...
No. I was replying to David Cameron, and then I said after that, on your programme, but we can do better than that.
Come on, dude. Better than Norway? The Norway deal means that anything made legally in Norway is automatically legal to sell across the whole of the EU. That's because they have shared standards on pretty much everything. So a deal that's better than Norway means we have to at least have that. That means being in the single market. So if you say better than Norway, you are saying we're going to stay in the single market.
We can be better than Norway. We can be better than anybody if we just believe in ourselves.
We can be better than anybody if we just believe? I mean, do I even need to comment on that one? Also, the irony of a man in a car crash interview saying that he would be able to negotiate a better deal? Unbelievable.
Your party, the Brexit Party, has no manifesto in this election at all.
Oh, we're the only one with a clear policy platform.
Well, you don't have a manifesto.
Well, you know, I will never, ever use the word manifesto again. Manifesto to me has a word association with lie, because that's what we've had, an election after election. Policy platforms, no manifestos from the Brexit Party.
Now that's what should terrify you more than anything. A party without a manifesto led by Nigel Farage. Just to be clear, if you haven't got a manifesto, you haven't made any promises. And if you haven't made any promises, there's nothing to hold you account to. Yet here's Donald Trump's best friend complaining about unaccountable elites.
These things are really interesting to your viewers, not trawling back through a series of quotes from years ago.
You can't complain about dredging up stuff from the time of the Brexit referendum when your entire party is about the Brexit referendum.
The only way that we can really judge the Brexit Party in the round at the moment is by looking at its leader, looking at you. So let's look at you for a moment.
Well,
do you still want to replace the NHS with a private insurance-based system?
I never did. I would like to take the burden off the NHS.
I love when he straight up lies.
I think we are going to have to move to an insurance-based system of healthcare.
Frankly, I would feel more comfortable that my money would return value if I was able to do that through the marketplace of an insurance company than just us trustingly giving 100 billion a year to central government and expecting them to organise the healthcare service from cradle to grave for us.
But as I say, here we are with one of the biggest changes in politics that's ever occurred,
okay,
and you're not even interested.
Do you still
What's wrong with the BBC?
Do you still want to
What is wrong with the BBC?
Do you still want to roll back gun controls and reintroduce handguns to this country?
This sums it up. Do you know, I've been going around the country speaking at packed rallies every night, and do you know who's not there? The BBC. And from this line of questioning now, I can see why.
Do you still?
You're just not interested, are you?
Do you still feel uncomfortable with foreign languages being spoken on trains?
Let's talk about democracy. Let's talk about trust. Let's talk about competence in politics. This is ludicrous.
Do you still feel that people with HIV shouldn't be allowed into this country?
Do I think the National Health Service is there for British people? Yes, I absolutely do.
So you still do?
This is absolutely ludicrous. I've never in my life seen a more ridiculous interview than this.
Oh, his meltdown is just mwah.
You are not prepared to talk about what is going on in this country today. You're in denial. The BBC's in denial. The Tory and Labour parties are in denial.
You're in denial. You're in denial. This whole court's in denial.
Well, let's return to the thing that you are most well known for, to a lot of people watching, which is that famous poster, the Breaking Point poster.
The one opportunity he missed was the Breaking Point poster. Now, he did get him to admit that he doesn't regret doing that poster, but he should have nailed Nigel Farage to the wall as to why that poster was fundamentally racist. Namely, that the people in that poster aren't EU citizens, therefore they don't have the rights of free movement. And because the UK isn't part of the EU's common asylum policy, none of the people in that photo had any rights to enter this country under EU law. So they had nothing to do with Brexit. And yet, Nigel Farage chose specifically people of Middle Eastern ethnic background to scare people about immigration from European countries. The only way any of those people could possibly enter the UK is if they become EU citizens, which in countries like Germany takes 7 or 8 years, at which point they'd be German-speaking, fully integrated into German society, German citizens. At which point you ask Nigel to tell me, how come German citizens of Syrian origin are more of a problem than German citizens of German origin?
Are you saying the Brexit Party would not put up a poster like that?
Well, it wouldn't, because it isn't the burning issue of the time.
Do you regret it?
Do I regret helping
that poster?
Do I regret helping to win?
Because I only just spotted that now, thanks to... he said that that poster helped win him the referendum, yet now he's saying that it's irrelevant because things have moved on and now that's no longer an issue. By definition, if that poster won him the referendum, but the refugee crisis is no longer a major issue, that means a new referendum is required.
The government is trying to sign us up to a new European treaty which keeps us tied in terms of our military, our security.
Nigel Farage really just complained that we'll still have security ties with the EU. Remember that thing called Europol? That thing that lets us know when international criminals and, terrorists are trying to get into the country? Nigel Farage is the biggest threat to this country right now because if he wins the European elections, we'd have sent a whole bunch of people with no manifesto to represent us at the European level. Which means that in the European elections, the best way for you to take back control of this country is to elect people who represent the values that you care about on the issues that you care about. So look for parties with actual manifestos on all the policies that affect your life and vote for the parties that represent you. Because otherwise, that con man is going to be the face of the UK for 10 consecutive years. And I'm not a nationalist, but I know the UK is better than that.